On today's episode of Locked On Suns, the win against Denver was huge. Lifted the spirits, got the fans certainly hyped. Did the Phoenix Suns turn a corner with that win? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Jase Basketball Show, wherever you get your podcasts. A big thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to start off your Thursday, another home Suns game day. We are free and available everywhere, including YouTube, so just hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button, get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday. Become an everyday or get locked onto the Phoenix Suns all season long right here with this here show. That was a huge win. I think you just watched the clip that the Suns put out of Frank Vogel in the locker room. You see some of the reactions on the court as it went along. Momentum shifting type of win. Especially with how the Suns had come out of the All-Star break. They needed that. Big confidence boost for sure, if nothing else. But did the on-court product take a leap? Did the Phoenix Suns turn a corner? We'll answer that on today's episode. Today's show brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. We'll have more from Gametime later on in the show. I put out a watch back, the first of the season that I've done like this, for Locked On Suns Insiders. If that sounds like something you might enjoy watching, you can sign up for the Locked On Suns Insiders at the link in the show description below. Just click where it has all caps. It'll take you. You'll put your phone number in. You'll get texts of all of my observations on game days, news and rumors, including this press conference on Thursday, which I will be at, my observations from there, and these videos, watchbacks that I'm going to start doing on big moments in games, quarters, chunks, overtime, whatever the case may be. And I did one on the last 5 minutes of regulation into overtime of this win. And so I rewatched the whole game, but I did that video looking really closely. And I have a few observations of why I think the Suns did turn a corner and a little bit of why they didn't. Okay, so we'll do a little bit of both sides. And we have to start with the defense. So that win solidified, or I guess made good on, let's say it that way, the type of potential that I think this team always had on defense, simply because of execution and effort. Right now, after that win, the Suns are 13th on defense in the NBA. They're allowing the 13th fewest points per 100 possessions in the league. It's not elite. It's never going to be. But to pull out a win that strong and play that well on defense is good no matter what. I think we would have felt good about that type of a game for this team, no matter who the opponent was. But to do it against a team that is surgical and has chemistry and two incredible creators in Murray and Jokic, obviously is a huge deal. No, even more so than any other opponent. But again, it came as a result of effort and execution, not a bunch of game-changing turnovers that they created, or it's not as if Jokic or Murray had their worst games of the season by any means. They didn't really force the Nuggets into a ton of turnovers, period. They allowed the Nuggets to get some offensive rebounds, all these types of things. But they made effort and execution plays, the Suns did, when they needed to. And I would say that top to bottom. I think you have to say it starts with Jusuf Nurkic, though, right? Nurkic, but I would actually extend this beyond him. I think he set the tone. I think his strength, his physicality, his timing on defending Jokic in isolation and in the post, as well as defending the two-man game between Murray and Jokic, set the tone. But I would include Grayson Allen in that, and I would include Drew Eubanks in that. And the goal with those two guys, the goal with that two-man game, is to disrupt, right? I think that's the key word. Affect their timing, right? Affect them being able to get to their spots. So Jokic likes to post up and kind of ease his way in closer to the basket, dribble by dribble, step by step. Well, stonewall him. Don't allow him to do that. Make Murray pick up his dribble sooner than he wants to. Make him be off balance when he takes the shots that he takes. In the two-man game, have Murray come off that screen a beat slower than he wants to, or have to take an angle he wasn't planning on. Like, that's really the goal, because they're great players, right? I mean, they just won a championship. Jokic is probably on his way to his third MVP, and I thought the Suns did that. And I thought Nurkic was the head of the snake. Otherwise, on defense, I thought there were other solid aspects here, right? The Suns' transition defense was really strong. Some of these things that maybe we just kind of take for granted at this point, but while we can all kind of roll our eyes that it was another fourth quarter collapse and everything else, I think the reality is that it wasn't the same old thing. They didn't turn the ball over as much, which then allowed it for there not to be as many transition opportunities. But I think the Suns' transition defense was very solid. I think that they played with pretty good pace. Some of this stuff is not defense, but you get my point. And when it comes to the transition defense, that is a huge aspect of what you have to do to beat Denver. I've always said that why Denver is so difficult. Yes, Jokic is a monster. He's a robot. He's just going to create a good shot almost every single time down the court, no matter what. But it's also that they can offensive rebound. They play well in transition. They can get to the free throw line. So there's really just no hole. They do everything well on offense. But in this game, the Suns were able to take away the transition stuff. And so you kind of create a little bit of a hole. The box score says that they had 26 fast break points. I really kind of find that hard to believe, especially considering that they only had 13 points off turnovers. Something doesn't quite gel there. If you look at cleaning the glass, sometimes they will have some deeper numbers. I will let you know what the transition stuff said then. Yeah, it said Denver was pretty effective, but nothing incredible, and mostly it was just the sheer volume of how often they were running, and I thought the Suns did a good job of meeting them where they were. The last part of this is, aside from the Jokic-Murray thing, aside from transition, it's just these little moments, right? Bradley Beal getting having two fouls called on him late in the game it might have both been against Jamal Murray. That's, to me, a good thing. I know they're fouls, but they didn't result in free throws, and he was playing physically. Beal had a strip on Jokic at one point. Obviously, some guys, Saban Lee, Drew Eubanks, are making energy, turnover, creating plays on a regular basis. The Suns are not going to be an elite defense. But to do this against this team proved that they do have a pathway. And to me, that pathway is disrupt, execute against the personnel that you're playing against, and take away the little stuff, right? Transition defense may seem like something you only notice when it's bad, but when it's good, that can really shave 2, 4, 6, 8 points off of a team's score if they're not able to get those easy ones. You add all that up, and it's a game that you can go ahead and steal on the road against a great, great team. And it would lead you to believe that if the Suns can continue to build those habits and do those things game by game, they've established what a blueprint can look like for winning playoff games and having some defensive moments be part of that recipe. Let's continue through our question of whether the Suns have turned the corner with what they did down the stretch overall, overcoming a poor fourth quarter to completely dominate overtime and capture the win. We'll get into the specifics coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Do you ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Well, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capability to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. In addition, the 2024 Nissan Armada will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger and explore further in the 2024 Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Keeping it rolling. Talked about the defense. I do think the Suns proved some things on the defensive end in this game. Did they prove anything in terms of their late game execution? It's a tough question because it was very much a tale of two stretches, right? Like the first 9 minutes of the fourth quarter and then the last few minutes into the overtime period. Here's where I come down, right? I think any of the numbers you look at with the fourth quarter at this point are broken, right? Like on the broadcast on TNT last night, they flash up on the screen of, the Suns' fourth quarter net rating is more than doubly as bad as anybody else's in the league. And you can do net rating, you can do pure plus minus. They've been outscored by significantly more. The offense in particular has been an issue, so the offensive rating is bad. But as I've noted a few times, some of the other indicators have improved. Their pace used to be near the bottom of the league in the fourth quarter. It's not anymore. So that has built up and gotten above water. I think at this point, a lot of the recent fourth quarter issues, so the Thunder one was awful. I'm not going to beat around the bush or lie to you about that. But that was an exception lately. I think we would all agree. And that might be partially why it felt so frustrating, is because you think a team has turned the corner in a category or an aspect of the game, and then when they prove that to be incorrect, it can be very deflating. What I would say on that is, not to get too far afoot on the Thunder game again, but that one, it's like, okay, well, the Celtics had a fourth quarter collapse on Tuesday, and they haven't had quite the same level of issues. They're a much better record than the Suns, but I'm sure there's a lot of Celtics fans who are like, can we please just close a game out, creating good shots down the stretch once and for all, without this stupid narrative about our team that is very true continuing to plague us, right? Like, it happens. And so I'm not going to say that the Thunder game was a regression back to those same old issues, just like I'm not necessarily going to say that this Nuggets game and the way that they dominated the last few minutes was some sort of clutch switch being flipped and now the Suns are going to be great in those moments. But in this case, I think they just missed shots. Okay? I think that sometimes is all it is. And I did say in the recap show that we did on Tuesday night, Brandon and I, that some of those KD jumpers might as well have been turnovers, right? Like, I wouldn't say those were exactly elite efficient possessions when he is just kind of taking one dribble toward the middle of the floor and just chucking a shot over whoever is guarding him. Of course, that's not fully what you want, and those were empty possessions at times. But you could say that. You can also admit that, Beal had an open three that he missed when he checked in, and they were getting offensive rebounds, which usually tend to be some of the best shots you can get in a basketball game, is a putback, whether it's the dunk by a guy who actually got the rebound or a kick out off of that, anything. And those did not lead to good possessions for them. So it's a lot of it was just misses. At the same time, if you zoom in at the very end of the game, I do think the Suns' process was solid. And that's part of why I tend to believe that it was just misses. They were going after Michael Porter Jr. really effectively. They were doing whatever they were trying to do, whether it was getting MPJ isolated, whether it was trying to go at Nikola Jokic in his drop defense and stick a pull-up jumper in his face like Beal did in the 4-minute mark, the shot that I said was the moment of the game in last night's podcast. Those are all things I think you have to be pretty optimistic about. And they did all of that early in the clock, was my point. That's all good stuff, right? And I think in general, the ball movement was good throughout, especially to attack the Nuggets defensive scheme, which is often to send the low man, weak side help defender early to kind of help protect Jokic's limitations and everything else. They found the shooter whose man was helping off of him really quickly throughout the game, and they were creative about, okay, maybe Durant's going to be actually the spacer to make the help have to come off of him and things like that. And they were cycling through those things effectively, rapidly, and not losing focus on it. I think those are all really solid. I think that they had a defensive game plan late in having a smaller player at times guarding Jokic so that they could switch the two-man action between him and Murray and have somebody like Royce O'Neal guarding Murray after that switch happens, while still being smart about, okay, yeah, Eubanks and Nurkic may not be guarding Jokic anymore, but let's still take advantage of them. Let's have them planted in the paint on taking away Jokic's role early, being set up there rather than rotating and trying to do that and fouling him after the play's developing already. All these different things. So you might be wondering, okay, well, you're saying it was all good, but you're saying they didn't turn a corner in that regard. And I guess it comes back to the fact that I think they've been doing a lot of this stuff for at least a couple months now, if we're being honest. The numbers might not show it. There are games like that Thunder game or Atlanta, whatever you want to point to, where it still falls apart. It still comes up short. But I guess I don't watch this Nuggets game and say, wow, the Suns really turned a page and it's a whole new ball game now. I think this was just a higher level, higher stakes version of a type of a game we've seen the Suns play. And I think that just really, at the end of the day, speaks to their volatility. It speaks to how up and down they are, how unreliable they are, more than anything, to me. You might think that's bad. I wouldn't say it's bad. I just think this team is inconsistent. And maybe turning a corner is really going to be, okay, let's see what they do the last 20 games, period. Not just one at a time, but can we look up at the end of the season when this last quarter of it is over and say, okay, now they really turned a corner because they continually did some of the things that we've seen them do in spurts. We talked about this a little bit, but the Suns low-key match up well with Denver. I think we can say that pretty definitively now after their relative success in the playoffs last year and a couple of solid performances in the regular season this year. Does that matter? Does that affect how we should think about them in the West and as a title team? We'll get into all that next. First, today's show brought to you by Gametime. I already have my eye on something where I will need to use Gametime this upcoming summer. The Copa America. I'm a big soccer fan outside of basketball. It's probably my second favorite sport. And big international tournament coming to State Farm Stadium. Tickets are already going. The prices are getting out of control. I know Gametime is going to be the place because they have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. They take the guesswork out of buying tickets. That's why I love them. They basically, if you've ever had an issue with a ticketing app where you're like, man, I got screwed on the back end with some of these fees, or I didn't think my seat was going to be this view, or whatever. Gametime pretty much created an app out of the comment section of all the other worse apps, is how I would think about it. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money, which means on top of all those perks and features, they also have zone deals, Gametime guarantees, meaning if you find a ticket that you buy for less elsewhere, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. So on top of everything else, again, obsessed with finding you ways, helping you save money. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON to try it out. Get $20 off your first purchase, whether that's the Copa America or the upcoming Suns homestand. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Closing out the show with some thoughts on this matchup. So, again, we discussed this a little bit, Brandon, Duenas, and I, on Wednesday's show, on the post-game show. But here's the deal. The Suns are pretty good against the Nuggets, right? Obviously, the 2021 series illustrated that. Those teams were very different. Chris Paul is gone. Michael Porter Jr. is way better. Jamal Murray is back. But that's one data point. I'm not typically the type, I know I see people in the comments. I know the Locked On Suns insiders are giving me the feedback of like, maybe I embody the Monty Williams, never too high, never too low kind of mindset with this team. But nothing makes me more upset in terms of the narratives around this team or anything else than the idea when people try to say that the Lakers or even the Timberwolves or whoever, maybe the Miami Heat, were the most competitive against Denver during their dominant postseason run in 2023. No. You know who was the most competitive against the Suns in that postseason, against the Nuggets in that postseason run? The team that beat them the most times, which was none other than the Phoenix Suns. All right, so I think you have to feel pretty good about that if you're Phoenix. Like, people try to poke holes in that by saying, well, it took Durant and Booker being like out of this world good. Is that not what they are? The team is built around Kevin Durant and Devin Booker being incredible on offense, and they did that, and they won 2 games, and somehow that makes it less real? I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense. I take that very seriously. The December game, I think you would have to say, showed that Durant can in fact score on this Nuggets team despite some struggles in the playoffs last year. Nurkic can match up well with Jokic. And then in this game, a lot of things came to be true. The defense, like we talked about, Durant and Beal both being able to be impactful in certain moments. The Suns kind of playing the pace game to a draw, which was not the case in a lot of the matchups last season. So what does that mean? Well, it's part of why I'm starting to just accept the fate that maybe this is the first round matchup we're going to get, although right now it would actually be the 3-6. For a while, these two teams were sitting at 4 and 5, and it felt like that's where we were headed. Now it would actually be the 3-6 matchup because the Clippers are flailing a little bit and the Pelicans are staying hot. But if that's the case, I've kind of accepted it. You know, you're probably going to have to play Denver at some point. And if you feel decently confident in that matchup, then so be it. You know, Devin Booker didn't even play in this game, and we know they didn't have an answer for him, right? But I guess beyond that, the question becomes, okay, so if you're more competitive against the Nuggets than a lot of the rest of the West is, and maybe you're going to play them early, does that mean we should be treating that as an important fact, an important factor in how we're evaluating the Suns' chances in the West? It's kind of like a overly complicated question, but I guess the bottom line thing I'm asking is, do the Suns have a better chance to come out of the West than we think because they have a better chance of beating the best team in the West than their competitors do? And I think the answer is sort of yes. Right? Like if you were to tell me, let's say it is 3-6, which would mean the Suns play the Thunder in round 2 most likely. I mean, that's not great, but it very well could be the Minnesota Timberwolves. And if you're asking me, could the Suns beat the Nuggets in round 1, Wolves in round 2, and then get to the conference finals? I don't think the answer is immediately a no. Whereas if you were to say, you know, maybe the Suns get to 5 and they play the Clippers in the first round and then they play the Thunder in the second round, I would not have confidence that the Suns can get through both of those teams just based on how this season has gone. So maybe it's not too complicated, right? You look at the teams ahead of them. If this game leads you to be optimistic about how the Suns might look against Denver, then that is simply one more team that they can beat in the conference. So it should make you feel better about their chances to get through the conference. But considering that whether it's betting markets or whatever else, I don't think the Suns are thought of as a bona fide threat at this point in the season. Maybe it's another reason that this win should put a little wind in your sails as a fan, put a little wind in this team's sails from a confidence standpoint, and give them a little boost. We'll see. Interesting matchup coming up tonight against Toronto. Always a weird team to play, but they are without Scotty Barnes. I'll have a recap of that coming Thursday night. If you want my preview thoughts, you can subscribe to the Locked On Suns Insider community, where I send out my keys to the game every morning, as well as halftime takeaways, sometimes post-game takeaways, more of these video watchbacks and everything else, all on game day for you. I'll also have a recap episode of this podcast after I return home from covering the game late on Thursday night. So hit follow or subscribe here if you have not already to get that show in your feed. Enjoy the game, enjoy the day, and I will catch you guys Thursday night.